I kept my head down as I stepped into the back of the ceremony hall, the faint scent of salt drifting in from the harbor behind the venue. I'd driven 6 hours just to sit in the very last row where no one would recognize me, or so I hoped. My sea blue scarf, one of the few things my daughter, Lila, had ever given me before the walls went up, was tucked into my jacket pocket. I hadn't worn it in years, but somehow it calmed the tremor in my hands. The place was beautiful. White chairs, soft light strung overhead, and the kind of crisp autumn air that made you think of second chances. I wasn't here for that, though. I just wanted one quiet look at my daughter on her happiest day. I didn't need her to see me. I didn't need anyone to see me. I had accepted that a long time ago, or at least I thought I had. When the music rose and she appeared at the aisle, my chest tightened. She looked stunning, dark curls pinned back, a simple gown, holding the same chipped mug she'd insisted on using for her coffee as a kid turned into a bouquet holder by some crafty florist. Even from a distance, I could see that stubborn little crease between her eyebrows. It used to show up when she concentrated on schoolwork or drew doodles in the margins of her notebooks. I hadn't seen it in person in nearly 8 years. I told myself not to cry. I almost succeeded. My ex-wife, Sandra, sat in the front row wearing a smile I knew too well, wide, polished, and completely false. She was the reason I wasn't invited. She'd spent years telling Lila I'd chosen my career over her, a phrase she repeated so often it calcified into truth for them both. But I knew what really happened. The divorce, the hidden clause in our custody agreement that let her relocate out of state if she could prove my inconsistency. And the affidavit she'd had a friend of hers notarize, one I'd only discovered years after losing contact, that falsely claimed I missed 6 months' worth of scheduled visits. I kept a copy of it folded in my wallet, not out of bitterness but because it was the last piece of the puzzle that explained how things had crumbled so fast. The ceremony was short. Quiet. Almost peaceful. I thought I could slip away afterward, unnoticed, satisfied with having seen her reach a milestone I feared I'd miss forever. But the reception hall was directly on the path to the parking lot. The problem with being the invisible man is that sometimes you need to cross the room full of people who've decided you don't exist. I walked in anyway, head low, hoping no one was paying attention. I found an empty corner seat by the bar. A fridge magnet proverb hung behind it: truth doesn't mind being questioned, a lie hates being challenged. I stared at it longer than I meant to, wondering if the universe was mocking me or nudging me. The toasts began. Her best friend. Her new in-laws. Then Sandra stood and took the microphone. I froze. Some of you know how hard I worked to raise Lila on my own, she said, placing a dramatic hand on her chest. I had to protect her from someone who didn't care. Someone who left us when she was little. Someone who chose himself over his own daughter. My stomach dropped. She wasn't just erasing me. She was burying me alive. Lila laughed awkwardly, the kind that didn't reach her eyes. Mom, it's fine. But Sandra wasn't finished. I won't mention his name, she continued, because he doesn't deserve to be remembered here today. A murmur rippled across the tables. I felt my pulse hammering in my neck, a slow, hot pressure building until I thought I might actually pass out. She'd once told me she would make sure no one remembered I ever existed, and now she was doing it in a room full of people celebrating my daughter. I reached for the brass key in my pocket, the one from Lila's old treehouse, the one place she used to say, felt like ours. It had been on my keyring for over a decade, heavy with memories. I gripped it like it might keep me anchored. I thought I could sit still. I thought I could bear it. But then Sandra said, Lila grew up stronger because she had no father dragging her down. And I'm proud to say that today, she stands here free of his influence entirely. Free of me. Lila's face fell. Subtle but unmistakable. Something about that hurt more than the lie itself. Before I knew what I was doing, I was on my feet. My chair scraped loudly across the floor, and dozens of faces turned toward the sound. I didn't mean to speak. Truly, I didn't. But I heard my own voice, steady and low, cut through the room. That's not true. Sandra whipped around, and when she saw me, the blood drained from her face faster than I'd ever seen. Lila stared like she was seeing a ghost. I should have sat down. I should have walked out. But something in me, years of silence, years of watching the narrative twist, snapped free. I'm sorry, I said to the room. I didn't come to make a scene. I only wanted to see my daughter get married. Somewhere near the DJ table, someone whispered, "Is that?" Sandra stiffened. "You don't belong here." "Maybe not," I said quietly. "But you shouldn't lie about me. Not today." She opened her mouth, ready to unleash something vicious, but then a man I didn't recognize, Lila's fiancé's uncle, maybe, raised his phone. "Is your name Daniel Brooke?" he asked. I blinked. "Yes." He nodded slowly. "Then you might want to see this." He tapped his screen, and the image enlarged. A screenshot of a community legal forum post, time-stamped years ago, discussing a custody case involving a father named Daniel whose ex falsified an affidavit to gain relocation rights. My heart lurched. That affidavit. Someone had posted about it. Someone recognized my name. How? Before anyone could process it, he added, "I used to work in the clerk's office back then. I remember the case." The affidavit was proven doctored in the audit the following year. A wave of murmurs surged through the room. Sandra's wine glass shook in her hand. Lila looked between us, breath unsteady. "Mom, is that true?" Sandra's lips pressed into a hard line, but she didn't answer. I didn't expect redemption in a single moment. I didn't expect anything, really. But as I stood there, clutching the brass key in my palm, I felt the smallest shift in the air, as if some long-closed door had creaked open, just a sliver. Lila rose slowly from her seat. "Dad," she whispered, the word fragile but real. It was the first time she'd called me that in years. And it nearly undid me. The room wasn't hostile anymore. It wasn't warm either. It was somewhere in between, an audience caught between lies and truth, waiting for the next breath. I didn't know what would happen next. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't completely invisible. And that, somehow, was enough to keep standing. The room felt like it had tilted slightly, not in a dramatic movie-style way but in the subtle, disorienting way a boat shifts under your feet when you aren't prepared for the swell. People weren't whispering in the same judgmental tone they had a minute ago. Now it was more careful, curious. I didn't know if that was better or worse. Lila stood frozen beside her chair, fingers pressed to her collarbone like she was steadying her breath. Her new husband, Evan, rested a hand on her arm, eyes drifting toward me with something close to sympathy. Maybe even understanding. But it was too early to hope for that. Sandra collected herself, spine rigid, jaw locked tight. She stepped forward as if reclaiming the microphone would let her rewrite the room. "Everyone, please sit down," she said sharply. "This is not the time for." "It's exactly the time," the uncle with the phone muttered, not loudly but loud enough. A few heads nodded. Sandra turned on him. "You have no idea what you're talking about. That audit was irrelevant. My friend notarized the affidavit full." I cut in, voice steady. "Your friend notarized it on a day she wasn't even working. The state confirmed that years later." Sandra's eyes snapped to mine, wide for a fraction of a second before narrowing into a glare. The kind she used in court to make people shrink. But I didn't shrink this time. Lila looked at me, really looked at me, like she was trying to match the pieces of the man she'd been told about with the one standing in front of her now. "Dad," she whispered again, barely audible over the soft hum of chatter behind her. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" The question hit harder than anything Sandra had said. Because the truth was complicated, messy, and humiliating. I swallowed. You wouldn't take my calls. I wrote letters. Sent messages. All returned or blocked. I didn't want to interrupt your life after it became clear you didn't want me in it. Her chin trembled. The crease between her eyebrows deepened. Sandra tried to interject again. This is ridiculous. You're ruining her wedding day. I'm not the one who brought him up, Evan said quietly, turning to face her. You were. That shut her up for a moment. A waiter, stuck mid-step with a tray of drinks, slowly backed away like he'd just walked into the wrong classroom. People were shifting, adjusting, processing. I could almost track the change from table to table as the story reshaped itself. I forced myself to inhale, to hold on to something solid. That brass key in my pocket dug into my palm. Lila had given it to me when she was 9. She'd insisted I keep the treehouse safe. Back then, she believed I could protect anything. Sandra crossed her arms. You don't have proof of anything. I pulled the folded page from my wallet, the audit summary I'd hung on to all these years. It wasn't dramatic, just black text on official letterhead, but its weight felt heavier than iron. I didn't come here to do this, I said, stepping forward only enough to hand it to the nearest vendor, who passed it to Lila. But since you dragged me into your speech, this is the truth. Lila took the paper with shaking hands. Evan leaned in, reading with her. Her shoulders slowly slumped as she reached the final line, document invalid due to procedural irregularities and falsified visitation record. She looked up at her mother, voice barely above a breath. Mom, why? Sandra stared back with a cold defiance I knew all too well. I did what I had to do. You needed stability. He wasn't reliable. That's not what this says, Lila replied. Her voice was soft but far steadier than I expected. Sandra scoffed. You were a child. You don't understand what it was like. I had to make choices. Hard ones. I felt something twist in my gut. Not anger. Something deeper. Evan stepped between them slightly, as if bracing for impact. Did you ever tell her that he kept trying? That he drove across states just to wait at pickup spots where you never showed? That the court letters came back undelivered because you changed addresses without notifying them? Sandra's face drained again. How do you know any of that? He raised his phone. Because when we got engaged, I looked up our family record since the county keeps old legal documents digitized. I wanted everything clean before we applied for our marriage license. I saw the audit. I didn't know the details, but I knew something didn't add up. The whispering swelled again. Lila's breathing quickened as she stared at Evan, that paper still trembling in her hand. Why didn't you tell me? I thought it wasn't my place, he said softly. I didn't want to ruin your relationship with your mom. I figured there had to be more to the story. She looked down at the paper again, then at me, her eyes searching for something, answers, maybe. Or memories. Or a grounding point in this shifting landscape. Sandra stepped closer, grabbing Lila's wrist gently but firmly. Sweetheart, you don't have to listen to this. He abandoned us long before the court did anything. He. Enough, Lila said suddenly. The word wasn't loud, but it carried through the room like a small ripple hitting every corner. I loved both of you, she continued, voice breaking. But one of you fought to stay, and one of you fought to erase the other. Sandra's expression cracked for the first time, not fully, but enough to see the fear beneath the anger. Evan guided Lila back into her seat, keeping one hand on her shoulder for comfort. Then he turned to me. Would you sit? He asked softly, motioning toward the table beside theirs. My throat tightened. I didn't trust my voice, so I nodded. Walking toward them felt surreal. Every step a reminder of years lost, memories cut short, letters unopened. I sank into a chair, feeling strangely out of place beneath the string lights overhead. Lila's eyes glistened as she stared at me. I don't remember the last time I saw you. I do, I said. You showed me a bracelet you made out of string and beads. It spelled, Dad. You said you made it because you didn't want me to forget your name if we were ever apart. She covered her mouth as tears slipped down her cheeks. Sandra's voice cracked sharp through the moment. You think this changes anything? He still wasn't there for your birthdays. Your school events. Your graduation. I turned toward her, keeping my voice calm. You told me the wrong dates. More than once. You sent messages from numbers that didn't accept replies. You blocked my emails. You told the school I wasn't allowed to contact her directly without permission. Lila's breath hitched. Mom, did you? Sandra twisted her necklace nervously. Every mother has to make decisions. You didn't understand the pressure I was under. That's not an answer, Lila whispered. But it's the truth, I said quietly. At least part of it. Sandra grabbed her purse, eyes blazing. I don't have to justify myself to either of you. She started to walk away, but a small sound stopped her, a chair scraping lightly. Lila had stood. Mom, she said, voice trembling. Stay. Please. We're not done. Sandra paused, the tension between them like a wire pulled tight. But she didn't return to the table. Instead, she stood near the bar, arms crossed, watching with a mix of defensiveness and dread. Evan signaled the DJ to pause the music. People had stopped eating. Stopped drinking. They were simply watching, but not with cruelty, more with the stunned attention of witnesses who had stumbled into a truth too big to ignore. Lila sat again, turning toward me. Can we talk? Not here. But soon. A simple sentence. But every syllable felt like a second chance cracking through concrete. My voice wavered despite my effort. Of course. Whenever you're ready. She nodded, wiping her eyes. I want to know everything. Not today. But. I want to understand. Relief swept through me, slow, cautious, but real. Then she glanced at Sandra again, her expression tighter now, controlled. And I want the two of us to talk too. But not today either. Sandra didn't reply. Didn't move. Instead, she turned her face slightly away from the tables, but not enough to hide her trembling jaw. The room felt still, not quiet, but waiting. Waiting for what would come next, for the next truth to surface, for the next step in a long overdue reckoning. I sat there, hands clasped in my lap, the brass key warm from the heat of my palm. For the first time in years, I felt the faint, tentative outline of possibility. Not forgiveness, not yet. But a beginning. And beginnings, I'd learned, were sometimes the rarest kind of gift. The reception eased back into motion slowly, like a machine restarting after a long power outage. Plates clinked. Someone coughed awkwardly. The DJ whispered with the coordinator, trying to figure out whether to put the music back on or let the tension run its course. Meanwhile, Lila sat with her hands folded so tightly her knuckles blanched, as if she feared the moment might dissolve if she loosened her grip. Evan poured her a glass of water and placed it beside her without a word. Then he offered me one. I hesitated before accepting. It felt strangely intimate, like being welcomed back into a life I'd watched from a distance for years. Across the room, Sandra hovered near the bar, rigid, guarding her pride the way a cornered animal guards its last scrap of territory. She wouldn't meet my eyes, but I could feel the heat of her resentment even from a dozen steps away. She had planned this day down to the color of the napkins, but not this. Not me. I sat quietly while people finished their meals, trying not to look like I was waiting for something. Truthfully, I didn't know what came next. I'd expected to slip out unseen, go back home with nothing but the memory of my daughter in white. Instead, I had a growing stack of feelings I hadn't prepared for: hope, fear, grief, something close to anger but older and softer. At the head table, Lila finally spoke, her voice low but resolute. "Dad, can we step outside? There's too many eyes in here." Evan nodded. "I'll cover for you." We stood slowly, the scraping of chairs echoing far too loudly. A few people pretended not to watch. Others didn't bother. As we reached the exit, Sandra pushed away from the bar and followed us with a sharpness that made my stomach tighten, but Evan intercepted her halfway, gently placing a hand on her arm while speaking low enough that I couldn't hear. Whatever he said, it held her in place. Outside, the coastal wind brushed against us, carrying the chill that always came after sunset. The venue overlooked the marina, boats bobbing lightly in the dark water, reflections glimmering like scattered coins. Lila wrapped her arms around herself, and I instinctively reached for my jacket to offer, then stopped. That felt too soon. Too familiar. Too parental. The lines had blurred and twisted, I didn't want to jolt them further. "I don't know where to start," she said finally. "Neither do I admitted. A long pause filled the space between us, broken only by the faint sound of waves slapping against the dock. "I was angry with you," she said. "For years. I know. And I thought you didn't care about me." A sharp ache tugged at my ribs. "I cared more than you ever knew." She took a breath that shuddered in her chest. "When I was 13, Mom told me you'd moved on. That you were too busy. That you just stopped showing up." I closed my eyes briefly. "I never stopped showing up." "Then why didn't I see any of it?" Her voice cracked. "Why didn't I see the letters? Why didn't I hear your messages?" "Because she intercepted them." Lila blinked hard, as if absorbing the words physically hurt. "All of them. Every single one I sent after the move." She pressed a hand to her mouth. I shouldn't have believed her so easily. "You were a child," I said gently. She controlled the information. "You trusted what you were told." She wiped a tear with the edge of her thumb, frustrated by it. "I think part of me always wondered. Just a tiny part." That confession unraveled something inside me, something wound so tightly I'd forgotten it could loosen. "I wondered if you wondered," I said. "But I didn't want to make your life harder by forcing myself into it." "You wouldn't have made it harder," she whispered. I didn't tell her that her mother had once threatened to file harassment claims if I kept reaching out. Some truths could wait. Tonight was already heavy enough. Lila's gaze drifted to the water. "Do you remember my treehouse?" The key in my pocket seemed to respond to its name, almost warming at the memory. "Yeah," I said softly. "You made me bend halfway under the platform because you were convinced raccoons were squatting up there." She smiled faintly. "I forgot that. It was the last place we spent real time together." She turned to me with surprise. "You remember the last day?" "Of course." Her eyes softened. "What happened after that?" "Court filings," I said bitterly. "Address changes. A custody agreement I didn't even realize had been rewritten until it was too late." "That hidden clause," she whispered. "The audit mentioned it." I nodded. "Relocation rights if the father fails to maintain consistent visitation." Hard to maintain consistency when the visits were erased from the record. She looked down. "Mom told me you never fought the decision." "I fought for months," I said quietly. "The judge ruled before the audit came through. By the time the falsification was discovered, you were already settled here, and they declined to overturn it because of stability for the child." Her shoulders slumped, and she exhaled shakily. "You must have been furious." "I was devastated," I said. "But more than anything, I hoped you were happy. Even without me." A tear slipped down her cheek. "I wasn't." I swallowed hard. "I'm sorry." "No. I'm sorry." She hugged her elbows, shivering slightly. "This time, I did offer my jacket." She hesitated only a second before slipping into it, the sleeves too long, the collar hiding half her face. She looked impossibly young in that moment, like the girl who used to fall asleep in the back seat after school. "You know," she said softly, "I always wondered why I kept the bracelet you mentioned. The one with the beads. I didn't remember giving it to you. I carried it everywhere for years." She touched her wrist, as if imagining the bracelet still there. "I found mine a couple of years ago in an old box. The string snapped, but I couldn't throw it out. I wished I could say the same for the pieces of my life that had snapped. Some things had survived only because I'd buried them deep. I want to know you," she said suddenly. "Properly. As an adult. Not as a story someone told me." My throat tightened so fast I had to look away toward the water. "I'd like that. More than anything." She stepped closer, not hugging me, not yet, but standing near enough that the space between us felt smaller, more familiar. "We'll need time," she said. "And you'll have questions. I will too. But I don't want to wait 8 more years to ask them. I don't want that either." She took a breath. "There's something else." My pulse jumped. "What is it?" "I saw your name on the guest list." She lowered her gaze. "It wasn't supposed to be there." I blinked. What?" She nodded. "Evan added it. Quietly. He wasn't sure you'd come. But he hoped you would, because he thought I might regret it someday if you weren't there." I stared at the doors behind us where the muffled reception sounds drifted out. Evan, who barely knew me, who had no stake in my redemption, had given me a doorway back into my daughter's life. He said, she continued, that weddings are for truth. Not for rehearsed stories. A wave of emotion crashed over me, too messy, too big, too raw. "He's a good man." "He is," she said. Then her smile widened just barely. "And he's stubborn. You two might get along." For the first time that night, I laughed softly. It felt strange and rusty, like reopening a drawer I hadn't touched in years. Inside, music began again, slow, warm, pulling people back to dancing. Lila tugged the jacket tighter around her shoulders. "We should go back in. But, would you stay? Just for a little while?" "Of course," I said. "I'm not going anywhere." She paused at the door, eyes glossy but hopeful. "Thank you for coming today. Even if it wasn't how I imagined seeing you again." "Thank you for letting me stay," I replied. We stepped inside together, not quite side by side, but not far apart either, into a room that now held something fragile and new between us. Something I didn't dare name yet. But I knew this much, the truth had finally found a place to breathe. And maybe, just maybe, so had we. When we stepped back into the reception hall, the atmosphere had shifted, warmer in pockets, still tense in others, but no longer suffocating. People seemed less like spectators and more like bystanders trying to decide how much of the story they just walked into. A few offered polite, uncertain smiles. Others avoided eye contact entirely. I didn't blame them, weddings weren't built to hold this kind of truth. Lila kept my jacket around her shoulders, her fingers curled loosely into the fabric. Seeing her wrapped in something of mine, something ordinary, lived in, hit me with a nostalgia that felt almost dangerous. For a moment, I saw her as she used to be, a little girl who crawled onto my lap with bedtime questions. What if stars are just holes in the sky where the light leaks through? Will our treehouse still be there when I'm a grown-up? Back then, I answered easily. Now I wasn't sure I had answers for anything. Evan met us halfway across the room. His expression was a blend of worry, relief, and the kind of protective instinct I recognized instantly, because I'd once felt it too. "You okay?" he asked Lila softly. She nodded. We talked. His gaze slid to me. "And you?" "I'm processing," I said honestly. He exhaled with a faint, almost nervous smile. Good. That's good. Sandra still stood by the bar, stiff as a statue. Every few seconds she touched the strap of her purse or adjusted her bracelet, small, restless movements revealing cracks in her composure. When she saw us return, she straightened as if bracing for another impact. Lila tensed. I caught it in the way her shoulders lifted slightly, the way she inhaled through her nose rather than her mouth. Evan noticed too. He slipped his arm around her waist, not possessively, just steadying. "Do you want to avoid her?" he whispered. "No," Lila said quietly. "I think she needs space." "And so do I." Evan nodded, then turned to me. "There's someone who wants to meet you." I blinked. "Who?" Before he could answer, a young woman, maybe mid-20s, approached shyly from one of the guest tables. She held a camera with both hands, fingers fidgeting with the strap. "Hi," she said softly. "I'm Callie. I'm the wedding photographer." I nodded politely. "Nice to meet you." She bit her lip. "I overheard some of what happened. I didn't mean to, I'm sorry, but something clicked. Earlier today, Lila's mom asked me to remove someone from the ceremony preview shots. She said the man wasn't supposed to be there." My chest tightened. "Me?" Callie nodded. "Yes." And something felt off about her tone, so I saved the originals separately. I wasn't sure why. "But now, would you want copies? For your daughter? For yourself?" Lila's lips parted slightly. "You kept them?" "Yeah," Callie said. "I didn't want to erase someone's dad from their wedding photos. Even if I didn't know the whole story. I didn't trust myself to speak." Lila reached out, resting a hand lightly on Callie's arm. "Thank you. I'd really like those." Callie smiled, relieved. "I'll send you a link tonight." As she walked away, Lila whispered to me, "She noticed you. Even when I didn't." That simple sentence, so fragile and honest, hit me harder than any accusation ever had. Before I could respond, a voice rose across the room. "Excuse me. Everyone, may I have your attention, please?" The wedding coordinator stood near the DJ booth, flustered but determined. She tapped the microphone with a trembling hand, clearly thrown off by the evening's unexpected turn. "We're ready for the father-daughter dance." The room froze. People glanced at each other, at Lila, at me. A ripple of uncertainty swept through the tables like a breeze through tall grass. Lila stiffened, eyes darting to the side. "I can, skip it," she whispered. "Everyone's had enough drama." I shook my head. "This is your day. Not mine." "But it involves you," she said, voice small. "It doesn't have to," I replied gently. "You can dance with Evan's dad. Or your uncle. Or no one at all. Whatever feels right." She hesitated, chewing her lip. Evan stepped closer. "Or, she could ask you." His voice was calm. Steady. Lila's eyes lifted to mine. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. "I don't want to pressure you," she whispered. "This is all, a lot." "It is," I said. "But I'll do whatever makes you feel comfortable." The room seemed to wait with us, hanging on a decision that belonged only to her. Lila looked down at my jacket sleeves hanging past her hands. Then she reached into the pocket and touched the brass key I'd tucked there. She knew exactly what it was. "When I was little," she murmured, "you used to twirl me around our living room whenever the radio played something slow." I remember that. I don't know why that memory stuck, but it did. She lifted her gaze, eyes shimmering. Would you dance with me?" Not as a father-daughter performance for the crowd. Just as, us. A tight breath escaped me, half disbelief, half gratitude. "Of course." "Okay," she whispered, more to herself than to me. Okay. She walked with me to the center of the floor. People parted instinctively, forming a loose circle. Some were smiling. Some wiping tears. A few simply curious. The DJ, sensing the moment, chose a softer song, a gentle acoustic track that wasn't overly sentimental. Just warm. When Lila placed her hand in mine, it trembled. I didn't grip tightly, I didn't want her to feel trapped. Our movements were awkward at first, two people learning each other's rhythm again after too many silent years. But gradually, her shoulders relaxed. Her breath steadied. Under the dim lights, we moved slowly, cautiously. I didn't know, she said quietly. All these years. I didn't know. I'm not angry at you, I whispered back. Not for a single day. She swallowed. I'm angry at myself. Don't be, I said. You trusted the parent who raised you. That's not a flaw. It's natural. But I lost you because of it. No, I said softly. You were taken. That's different. Her lip trembled. Do you think we can fix it? We can try, I said. That's all I ever wanted. She rested her forehead lightly against my shoulder, not a full embrace, but an honest one. And for the first time in nearly a decade, I felt the ghost of the little girl who used to fall asleep against me after long days at the park. When the song ended, the room applauded, gentle, respectful, nothing extravagant. A recognition, not a celebration. Sandra didn't clap. She stood near the bar, pale and rigid, gripping her purse strap so tightly her knuckles whitened. Her stare was not angry now. Not even furious. It was terrified. Because control, her carefully built universe, had slipped through her fingers, and she could no longer rewrite the narrative with her voice alone. Not with witnesses, evidence, or the daughter who finally saw the cracks. Lila pulled back from me, eyes shining. Thank you, she whispered. Anytime, I whispered back. As we left the dance floor, Evan approached with a hesitant smile. You both looked, right. Like something that was always supposed to be. Lila squeezed his hand. It felt that way. Before I could respond, the coordinator hurried over. Daniel, someone left this at the front desk for you. She handed me a small, folded piece of paper. The handwriting on the front was unmistakably Sandra's. And the moment I saw my name written in her sharp, slanted script, cold dread seeped into my spine. Whatever was inside that note was not an apology. It was a warning. And I knew this night wasn't finished, not yet. I turned the note over in my hands, the thin paper somehow heavier than it should have been. Sandra's handwriting hadn't changed, sharp, rigid strokes that always looked like she carved the words instead of writing them. Lila glanced at it anxiously, her brows pinching the way they used to when she tried to solve a puzzle too quickly. Do you want to open it? She asked softly. Evan stood beside her with a protective stillness, his palm resting against her back as if ready to catch her should her mother's words hit hard. I'll read it, I said. But not here. Lila nodded, more relieved than disappointed. The reception had regained a semblance of celebration, guests back on the floor, laughter bubbling in pockets far from the earlier tension, but near us, everything felt fragile. Too many shifting loyalties. Too much truth hanging in the air. We slipped toward an alcove by the side exit, quiet, dimly lit, with a potted plant so large it could have doubled as a hiding spot. I unwrapped the note slowly, half expecting venom to drip off the page. It held only one sentence. Leave quietly after the reception. Do not contact Lila again. My stomach tightened. There was no threat spelled out, but I could hear all the old ones between the lines. Court filings. Restraining orders. Lies deployed like weapons. Lila saw my expression change. What does it say? I hesitated. It's not kind. She exhaled shakily. Just tell me. I handed her the note. She read it once. Then again, slower. On the third pass, her jaw set sharply, her hands trembling as she crushed the paper in her fist. Evan stepped closer. Lila. She can't keep doing this, she said, voice cracking with disbelief and fury. She can't keep controlling everything. She can't tell me who I get to have in my life. She's trying, I said softly. The same way she always has. I know, she whispered. But I'm not a child anymore. A bitter laugh escaped her, not amused, but disbelieving. She couldn't even pretend to be sorry tonight. Not even for me. She's scared, I said. Fear makes people cling harder to the stories they built. It doesn't excuse it. No, I agreed. It doesn't. Lila rubbed her face, trying to reset herself. Her makeup smudged slightly under her eyes, but she didn't seem to care. Dad, what do we do now? We take this one step at a time, I said. You and I can talk later. Quietly. On your terms. But tonight, let's not let her throw another shadow over your wedding. Lila nodded, breath quivering. Okay. We rejoined the reception, but every few minutes, my eyes drifted back to Sandra. She paced near the entrance, checking her phone, pinching the bridge of her nose. She looked like a person watching sand fall through her fingers, unable to stop the collapse. At one point, she made eye contact with me. For a moment, I expected her to storm over, unleash the fury she'd muted earlier. Instead, her expression faltered. Not anger. Not disgust. Guilt. But the moment passed, and she turned away sharply. The coordinator announced dessert. Servers moved quickly, placing plates before guests who now seemed eager to lean back into festivity. Evan's family embraced the dance floor, drawing Lila into a twirl that spun a genuine laugh out of her. Watching her smile, really smile, stirred something deep, something that felt dangerously close to joy. Callie, the photographer, approached me again. I grabbed something you might want, she said, holding out a small print. I took this right after you walked into the ceremony. I blinked at the photo. It showed me in the very back row, standing alone, staring at Lila walking down the aisle. In my expression, you could see everything: love, grief, pride, distance. I looked like a man witnessing a miracle he didn't think he deserved to touch. It's something, Callie said, a little nervous. I know it's not my place, but it felt important. It is, I said, my voice thick. Thank you. She nodded and slipped away. As I tucked the photo into my jacket, someone else approached, an older man in a gray suit with a kind face and the posture of someone used to giving sage advice. I'm Evan's Uncle Mark, he said. The one who recognized your name earlier. I shook his hand. I appreciate you speaking up. He shrugged. Truth deserves a voice. Then he lowered his tone. I remember watching that case move through the system. It wasn't handled fairly. I'm sorry for your part in it. What happened, I said. But it means a lot that someone remembered. Mark nodded, thoughtful. There is one thing you should know, though. He slipped his hands into his pockets, leaning closer. Sandra tried to call the venue manager earlier, said she wanted your name removed from the official guest registry. I tensed. She did? Yes. But the staff didn't comply. He offered a faint smile. You were on the list. By the groom. Relief washed over me, unexpected and grounding. Mark continued, she seemed frantic. Like a person trying to keep a secret from getting bigger. What kind of secret? I asked before I could stop myself. Mark hesitated. I'll let your daughter fill that in if she chooses. But you should know, she's not the only one Sandra lied to. My heart lurched. Before I could ask more, he stepped back. Take care of yourself, Daniel. And take care of Lila. She's going to need someone steady. I'll be here, I said quietly. For as long as she wants. As Mark disappeared into the crowd, a shadow fell across me. Sandra had moved closer again, her face tight with conflict. Do not twist my daughter against me, she hissed quietly, careful to keep her voice low. I don't have to, I replied, my tone calm, almost gentle. The truth is doing that on its own. Her breathing hitched, but she didn't lash out, not this time. Instead, she whispered, you don't know everything. Then tell me, I said. Her jaw clenched. Not here. She walked away before I could respond, leaving behind the faint, unmistakable scent of fear. The DJ called for the bouquet toss. Guests gathered cheerfully. Lila, seeing me watching, flashed a hesitant but warm smile. But even as I returned it, my mind was elsewhere, on Sandra's cryptic words. You don't know everything. Something deeper was buried in this family history. And for the first time since the custody battle, I felt the tremor of a door cracking open again, one holding secrets older than tonight. And I knew, with absolute certainty. What had happened so far was only the beginning of Sandra's unraveling. The bouquet toss finished with a burst of laughter near the dance floor, but my attention stayed locked on the place where Sandra had been standing moments before. She'd slipped out one of the side doors, not dramatically, no scene, no stomp, but with the quiet urgency of someone trying to outrun the consequences finally catching up. Lila rejoined me, cheeks flushed from laughing with her friends. You good? She asked, trying to read my expression. Yeah, I said. Just, thinking. She followed my gaze toward the exit. Her smile dimmed slightly. She's unraveling. She said I don't know everything, I murmured. Do you know what she meant? Lila frowned. No. But she's been hiding things my whole life. If there's more, I want to know too. The resolve in her voice surprised me, not angry, but steady, wounded, searching. Before I could respond, Evan hurried over, his phone buzzing in his hand. Everything okay? Lila asked him. He hesitated. I'm not sure. Your mom just texted me. Lila stiffened. What did she say? He turned the phone so we could read the message. Tell him to leave. I won't have him poisoning my daughter's wedding with lies. I'm calling someone who can fix this. Someone who can fix this. The phrasing chilled me, not because Sandra was dangerous, but because she believed she still had the authority to rearrange reality. She can't throw you out, Lila said firmly. She's working on it, Evan said. She cornered the venue manager earlier. And your aunt told me she's been whispering to the pastor too. I inhaled slowly. I don't want to turn this night into a battle. It already is, Lila said quietly. Mom started it when she brought you up in that speech. Her voice wavered, but her eyes stayed bright and resolved. Before I could say more, Uncle Mark appeared again, this time looking more concerned than before. Daniel, he said, can I speak with you for a second? Lila grabbed my sleeve. If it's about me or Mom, I'm coming too. Mark nodded. Then all three of us should step into the prep kitchen. It's empty. We followed him past the dessert tables and through a swinging door. Inside, the stainless steel counters gleamed under bright overhead lights. A single fridge hummed in the corner. The sudden quiet felt sharp after the din of the reception. Mark closed the door behind us. I wasn't going to involve you in this, he began, but Sandra's behavior tonight, it's too close to what happened before. Lila tensed. Before what? Mark exhaled heavily. When she applied for the change of custody all those years ago, she didn't just falsify the visitation records. She falsified something else too. Something I didn't think was my place to share until now. My pulse quickened. What was it? He hesitated, then said quietly. The financial affidavit. Lila blinked. What does that mean? I felt the air thin around me. The financial affidavit affects support, expenses, who pays for what? Sandra always claimed she carried the full burden alone. Said I never paid a dime. You did pay, Mark said. I saw the receipts in the clerk records. They weren't enormous, but they were consistent. Monthly. On time. Lila looked between us, disoriented. Mom always said you refused to help. I tried, I said softly. I wasn't wealthy. But I sent what I could. She submitted a revised financial form, Mark continued. Claimed you hadn't paid in almost a year. But the clerk's office logged every payment. And even though the audit flagged it later, your case was already closed. Lila pressed a hand to her forehead. Why would she lie about that? I answered gently. Because if she showed she'd managed the finances alone, it made her argument stronger. Courts tend to award relocation more easily when one parent appears financially unsupported. Lila stared at the metal countertop like it was the only thing keeping her upright. She didn't just keep you from me, she whispered. She built an entire story to justify it. Mark nodded solemnly. She's doing the same thing tonight. Twisting the narrative the moment she feels control slipping. A cold realization washed over me. She said she was calling someone to fix this. Who would she call? Probably Pastor Reynolds, Mark said. He's an old friend of hers. She might try convincing him to escort you out. But he doesn't have that authority, Lila said. No, Mark agreed. But if he backs her publicly, it creates the illusion he does. Sandra operates on illusion. Lila let out a shaky breath, then grabbed my hand, really grabbed it, fingers tightening like she was anchoring herself. The gesture almost brought me to my knees. She can't control this anymore, Lila said quietly. She can't control me anymore. A soft knock came from the other side of the prep door. Hello? A voice called. Is Lila in there? It was Pastor Reynolds. Lila's jaw tightened. She nodded at us, bracing herself. I'll handle it. She opened the door. The pastor stepped inside, holding his hat respectfully against his chest. He was gentle-looking, older, with kind eyes, but I knew from experience that kind eyes didn't always mean kind decisions. Lila, he said softly, your mother is quite upset. She says your father's presence here is causing distress. Lila didn't let him finish. Pastor, with respect, I invited him. His eyebrows lifted. Your mother told me the groom added him without your knowledge. I know he did, she replied. And I'm glad. Very glad. The pastor shifted awkwardly. She fears the situation might escalate. It already did, Lila said plainly. Because she made a speech full of lies. He looked startled. Lies? Yes, she said. And I'm not going to let her use you as a tool to push him out of my life again. Pastor Reynolds opened his mouth, then closed it again. He looked at me for the first time, really looked, and something softened in his face. Did you want to be here? He asked gently. Yes, I said. But only to see her happy. I had no intention of causing a scene. The pastor nodded slowly. I believe you. Lila stepped closer to him. Pastor, please don't listen to Mom right now. She's panicking. And she's not telling you the truth. He hesitated, then said quietly, your mother also mentioned financial neglect. Lila turned to me. I nodded once. Tell him. Her voice didn't shake this time. She lied. About all of it. Something about her certainty, her steadiness, seemed to settle the pastor's doubts. I see, he said softly. In that case, you have my support. And I will tell your mother she must calm down. Lila exhaled in relief. Thank you. He tipped his hat and left. Mark looked at us with a weary smile. That young woman, she inherited your backbone, Daniel. I swallowed hard, too overwhelmed to respond. When the door closed again, Lila leaned against the counter, finally letting the weight of the moment settle. I don't want to fight with her, she said. Not tonight. But I can't let her rewrite my life anymore. You're not alone, I said. She looked up, eyes glassy. Will you stay after the reception? Just for a little while. I want to talk privately. Without her, without everyone watching. Of course, I said. Anything you need. Outside, music swelled again, muffled by the walls. Lila straightened, smoothing her dress. We should go back out, she said. People will start to wonder. We left the kitchen together, stepping back into the warm pulse of the reception. But as we walked toward the dance floor, I noticed something under one of the centerpiece lanterns at our table, a folded piece of paper I hadn't seen before. I picked it up. It was another note. Same handwriting. Same sharp strokes. But this time, Sandra had written 5 words. You will regret staying tonight. The temperature around me seemed to drop. Because this wasn't fear. This was threat. And I realized. Sandra wasn't done. She was preparing her final move. The words on the note clung to me like frost. You will regret staying tonight. Not a plea, not a warning, something colder. Something calculated. I folded the paper carefully and slipped it into my jacket. I didn't want Lila to see it, not yet. She deserved joy in her wedding night, not another round of her mother's manipulations. But even as I tucked it away, my pulse stayed sharp and alert, the way it used to on long nights when I waited in court hallways for rulings that never seemed to land in my favor. Lila tugged my arm gently. Come on, she said. Let's try to enjoy at least a few minutes. I nodded, forcing my breath steady. I'm with you. We returned to the main hall where the reception felt like it had recaptured some of its glow, lights shimmering over the tables, guests dancing in tight circles, laughter rising again like bubbles breaking the surface. But beneath it all, a tension hummed. Some people watched us curiously, others avoided our eyes, eager to steer clear of anything resembling conflict. Evan's mother, a kind woman with silver hair and a warm presence, approached us with soft concern. Lila, sweetheart, are you sure you're doing all right? You've had a very full evening. I'm okay, Lila said, offering a tired but genuine smile. Just a lot to take in. Her mother-in-law glanced at me, and her smile grew gentler. Daniel, right? I'm glad you stayed. I'm glad you got to dance with her. Me too, I said, my voice quieter than I intended. She touched my arm lightly. Families are complicated. But truth has its way of surfacing. That simple statement grounded me more than she probably knew. But as she stepped away, I caught a flicker of movement near the venue entrance. Sandra had reappeared, makeup slightly smudged, eyes red, not from tears, but from something more volatile. She stood stiffly beside a man I didn't recognize, mid-50s, sharp suit, the expression of someone evaluating a situation rather than experiencing it. A lawyer. I knew the type instantly. When Sandra saw me watching, she whispered something to him urgently. He nodded once and began moving through the crowd toward our table. My breath tightened. This is her final move. Dad? Lila asked softly. You okay? I forced a smile. Yeah. Just noticing some things. Before she could press further, the man in the suit reached us. Mr. Brooke, he said politely. I'm Theodore Crane. I know who you are, I interrupted. Sandra called you. He didn't deny it. She's expressed concern about your presence. She stated that your being here constitutes a disruption to the event and distress to the bride. I raised an eyebrow. Does the bride look distressed to you? Crane's gaze flicked to Lila. Only mildly, he said evenly. Lila stepped forward. Mr. Crane. I didn't hire you. I didn't ask you to intervene. Your mother. My mother is acting alone, she said. Very alone. And she is not speaking for me. Please leave us alone. Crane hesitated. Your mother mentioned you might have been manipulated. That your father is attempting to. Lila cut him off with a laugh, sharp, bitter. Manipulated? Tonight? By him? No. No, Mr. Crane. I'm finally unmanipulated for the first time in years. Her tone was icy enough to freeze the room. Crane's professional mask slipped. Just briefly. I'm merely here to ensure. Ensure what? I asked. That she wins. That she controls the narrative. Again. Crane's jaw tightened. But before he could respond, Uncle Mark approached, tapping the lawyer's shoulder. Ted Crane, he said in a tone that held history. We've met before. At the county courthouse. Crane stiffened. Mark. I didn't realize you were here. You should've, Mark replied. Because I remember your involvement in the custody filings. And I remember the audit that followed. He stepped closer, voice lowering just enough to be firm without being hostile. If you want to revisit legal history tonight, I'm happy to walk through it with you. Crane's lips thinned. Sandra called me, Mark. I'm simply acting at her request. Her request doesn't override the bride's wishes, Mark said. Nor the groom's. Nor the venue's. Evan appeared behind Mark, arms crossed. Was someone trying to remove one of my guests? Crane swallowed. I didn't say that. You implied it, Evan said, stepping forward. And just so we're clear, you don't have authority here. And you're not on the contract. I am. The room around us had fallen to a hush. People were watching again. Crane straightened, realizing he was outnumbered, and worse, outleveraged. I'll speak with Sandra, he said curtly. He left. Sandra watched from across the room, her eyes searing into us. When Crane reached her, she grabbed his arm, whispering fiercely, but he shook his head and spoke sharply back. She froze, stunned. Her last ally had just slipped from her grasp. Lila exhaled shakily. I can't believe she went this far. This is what losing control looks like, Mark said gently. She's terrified. And dangerous, Evan added quietly. I touched Lila's shoulder. Do you want to leave? We can step outside for air. I'm fine, she said firmly. Actually, no. I'm not fine. But I'm done running. She turned toward Sandra. Lila, I began, but she held up a hand. I need to do this. She walked toward her mother, slow, steady. Sandra straightened, bracing herself, chin raised like she was about to be the one delivering judgment. When Lila stopped in front of her, the room quieted again. Mom, she said, her voice steady. I need you to listen carefully. Sandra crossed her arms. If you're about to embarrass yourself. No, Lila said sharply. I'm about to stop you. Sandra blinked. Tonight was my wedding, Lila continued. A day meant for love. And you turned it into a stage for your lies. You humiliated me. You humiliated him. She pointed gently toward me. Sandra's throat bobbed. I told the truth. No, Lila said. You told your version of it. And now the real one is unraveling. Sandra's lips parted, but Lila didn't let her speak. You lied to the courts. You lied to me. You lied to everyone in this room. And I don't know why. I don't know what you're terrified of. But I'm done being part of your story. Sandra's face cracked, fear leaking through the veneer. You're my daughter, she whispered. You owe me. Owe you? Lila's eyes hardened. I owe you nothing except honesty. And here it is, you don't get to control who I love. Not anymore. Sandra inhaled sharply. And if you try to come between us again, Lila continued, or twist the truth, or drag lawyers into my life, then I'll walk away. Completely. The silence was crushing. But, Lila added softly, voice breaking at the edges, if you tell the truth, if you actually try, you might not lose me. Not fully. Not forever. But the next step is yours. And it has to be honest. Sandra looked like she couldn't breathe. Lila turned away before her mother could respond. She walked back to us, her steps shaking. As soon as she reached me, I opened my arms, not fully, just enough that she had the choice. She stepped into them. Her forehead rested against my chest, her breath quivering. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry for what she did to you. I closed my eyes, swallowing the lump in my throat. You don't have to apologize for her. I know, she whispered. But I need to. We stayed like that only a moment, long enough to anchor us, short enough not to overwhelm her. Evan touched her back gently. You did the right thing. She nodded against my chest. I know. It just hurts. I know, I said. Truth usually does. When she finally stepped back, the room had resumed motion around us. People turned away, pretending not to have witnessed the moment. But the air was different now, lighter in some places, heavier in others. Something fundamental had shifted. Lila wiped her eyes. Can you stay after everything ends? I want to talk somewhere quiet. Without eyes. Without her. Of course, I said. I'm not going anywhere. But even as I said it, I felt a cold presence behind me, like a shadow peeling itself from the wall. I turned. Sandra stood at a distance, staring at me with an expression not of rage, but of devastation. And for the first time all night, she looked small. Breakable. She opened her mouth, just barely, but no words came. Then she stepped backward, turned, and walked out the side door into the night. And I couldn't shake the sinking feeling that her unraveling wasn't over. It had only just begun. The night slipped deeper around the venue, that soft coastal darkness where waves whispered against the docks like they were trying to confess old secrets. Guests began to drift out in slow currents, handshakes, hugs, laughter softened by exhaustion and wine. The music faded to a gentler tempo, the kind DJs used to coax people toward their coats. Lila stayed near me and Evan, her fingers occasionally brushing mine, not by accident, but by quiet intention. Every touch whispered the same truth, I'm here. I'm choosing this. And I held on to that. But even as the evening's chaos ebbed, Sandra's absence lingered like a cold draft under a closed door. The last we'd seen of her, she'd stepped into the night, alone, her shoulders curled inward as if bracing for something she couldn't outrun. And a strange ache settled in my chest, not sympathy exactly, but recognition. I knew what it looked like when someone's story finally collapsed under its own weight. We stayed until the final plates were cleared, the lights dimmed, and only a handful of stragglers remained. Evan's parents, ever gracious, approached. You two should go talk, his mother said, gently squeezing Lila's arm. We'll help clean up the last bits. Lila hugged her tightly. Thank you. Then she turned to me. Let's go somewhere quiet. We stepped out onto the terrace overlooking the marina. Lanterns glowed along the boardwalk. The air carried salt and a faint bite of cold that hinted at an early winter. Lila wrapped her arms around herself, so I draped my jacket, the same one she'd danced in, back over her shoulders. She tugged it close like armor. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she asked softly, do you remember the beach trip when I was 10? I blinked. The one where you lost your sandals in the tide and blamed a crab? She laughed, a sound fragile but warming. Yes. That one. I remember thinking you were the strongest person in the world when you carried me back to the car because the sand was too hot. You were small, I said, smiling faintly. I probably couldn't carry you that far today. Her grin widened, then softened. I don't know why that memory stuck with me. But it did. And tonight. I realized how many memories I have that don't match the stories I was told. I let her words settle. Memories have a way of resurfacing when the truth lets them breathe. She nodded slowly. Dad. I want you in my life. Really in it. But I need you to know something. I braced myself gently. Anything. I don't think I can forgive her quickly. And I don't know how to manage both relationships at the same time. I'm not cutting her out, not forever. But I need space. And I need you to understand that when I talk to her again, it won't be because I don't love you. It'll be because I have to untangle things, in my own way. I nodded, emotion pressing tight in my chest. I'm not asking you to choose. I never have. She reached out, taking my hand. You're not asking. She is. The truth of that cut deep. I don't want to lose her entirely, Lila whispered. I don't want to become someone who only loves by erasing. That won't happen, I said quietly. You don't have her instinct for destruction. She looked up at me, eyes shimmering under the lantern light. You really think so? I know so. A long breath left her. Then, can we do this? Can we rebuild? Slowly. A warmth spread through me, not sudden, not sweeping, but steady, like dawn slipping its first pale line over the horizon. We can, I said. I'm here for as long as you want me. She stepped closer then, tentative, vulnerable, and for the first time in years, she hugged me fully. No hesitation. No shrinking. Her arms wrapped around my ribs, her forehead pressed against my chest. I held her as gently as I could while still letting her feel the truth of it. I never stopped being her father. After a long moment, she pulled back and wiped her eyes. She's hurting, you know. Mom. I could see it. I nodded. Lies are heavy. Carry them long enough and they become chains. I don't want her to drown. I know, I said. And your compassion is proof you're nothing like the fear she raised you with. Lila let out a shaky breath. What do we do now? We take the next step, I said. Whatever that looks like. She smiled softly, then reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the brass key. I want to visit the old treehouse, she said. Someday soon. If it's still there. My breath caught. I don't know if it is. Then let's find out. Together. The word together landed like a gift in my hands, unexpected, precious. Before I could respond, footsteps echoed softly behind us. Sandra stood in the doorway of the terrace. Her eyes were red, her makeup smudged, her expression stripped of all pretense. For the first time, she didn't look like the version of herself she presented to the world. She looked like a woman who'd lost the battle she'd been fighting alone in the dark. Lila, she whispered. Lila stiffened. Sandra took a trembling breath. I won't stay long. I just needed to say this. I expected an accusation, or another attempt to twist the truth. But her voice broke in the middle. I'm sorry. The words dropped hard and unevenly, as if she didn't quite know how to shape them. Lila swallowed. For what? Sandra's lip quivered. For everything. For lying. For taking him away from you. For being so afraid to lose you that I forced it to happen. It wasn't polished. It wasn't complete. But it was real. Sandra turned to me then, eyes full of something like defeat and something like humility. I can't undo what I did. I was wrong. I know that now. If you hate me, I understand. I didn't answer right away. My heart warred with itself, old pain, old anger, old grief, and the fragile hope of a future where my daughter wasn't torn between competing stories. I don't hate you, I said slowly. But I can't pretend it didn't happen. She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. I know. I'm ready for whatever comes. Lila took a step toward her mother, not forgiveness, not yet, but a step. That's enough for tonight, she said quietly. We'll talk. But not now. Sandra nodded, visibly relieved just to not be turned away completely. She wiped her face, inhaled shakily, and left without another word. The terrace fell silent again. Lila exhaled. That was more than I expected. Me too, I admitted. She turned back to me. Will you walk me to the car? Evan's grabbing our overnight bag. Of course. We walked down the dim pathway between the lanterns. The night air felt lighter now, less like something holding its breath. At the car, she paused, turning to face me fully. Thank you for staying tonight, she whispered. If you hadn't, none of this would have come out. I brushed her shoulder lightly. Thank you for seeing me. She hugged me once more, brief but fierce. We'll talk soon. I promise. I'll be here, I said. She climbed into the car. Evan waved at me from across the lot, eyes kind, grateful. Then they drove off into the night, string lights reflecting gold across the windshield. I stood there alone for a while, the brass key warm in my hand. A symbol of something lost. And something newly found. A soft breeze came off the water. In the distance, a boat horn sounded deep and low. I wasn't invisible anymore. And neither was the truth.